Welcome to 60 minutes of unscripted .NET entertainment. Our mission is to empower the .NET community to achieve more. I'm your host, David Pine, along with co-hosts Scott Addie and Maira Wenzel. And we've got a very special guest today, a man that needs no introduction, Isaac Levin. But we're going to have you introduce yourself anyways. We're going to put you up.
No introduction. I don't know about all that. Yeah. So let's do this. You want to share my screen? I have like some links of my silly face and other places that you can see me. So folks who might not know who I am, I'm sorry. Otherwise, my name is Isaac Levin. I'm a Microsoft MVP and a member of the .NET community. If you want to follow along with some of the stuff that I create some content, I do some videos, I talk at events, I do all that sort of stuff. Here are a murray of links that you can find me. I also have a podcast called Coffee and Open Source, where I believe I've had every single person that's on the screen as a guest on my show. And if not, we'll fix that pretty quickly. Yeah, and just in general, .NET fan, been a .NET developer my entire professional career. And yeah, I love .NET and especially love the .NET community. One thing that I think is we'll talk about as well, I'm the chair of the marketing committee for the .NET Foundation. So love to talk about that as well as a part of this. But thank you, obviously, friends, for having me.
Awesome. This is great. I did just identify a potential opportunity for you to consider.
Uh-oh.
Coffee and open source. I don't believe Maira has been a guest.
No.
Has she not? Oh, okay, well that's gonna get fixed. Okay, so I will reach out to you, Maira, and we will schedule you being on the show. That is the silliest mistake on my part. And I like the way how you phrase that, Dave. Like opportunity. I mean, I think you can probably have a swear word. It's probably a bit better. But
You're so kind, David.
It sounded more like Maira was voluntold. Hey, you need to be on the show.
I swear, maybe Maira, we've talked about it. Maybe it didn't work out for whatever reason, or maybe I'm just an idiot. Probably I'm an idiot. But we'll rectify that because I want to have a conversation with you about your tech journey. So yeah. So if folks like that sort of stuff where people ramble about tech and all that sort of things. I've been doing that podcast for like 3 years and it's been a lot of fun. I've had some awesome folks. I've had Kelsey Hightower, Scott Hanselman, Liz Fong Jones, celebrities that you might know, David Pine and Scott Addie, not Maira Wenzel, I guess. But yeah, I'll stop talking about coffee and open source. I want to talk about .NET.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
But it's all part of the community, right? Like it's all
Yeah.
the resources where you can find folks from the community. So that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, so I think one of the things. Go ahead, Scott.
I was going to ask, maybe do we think that's a good place to start? Is your coffee and open source show kind of? What's the motivation behind running a show like that? How did you get started? What kind of benefits are you seeing from talking to folks both inside and outside of the .NET ecosystem?
Sure. Yeah, and you can unshare my screen so everybody can see our faces. No one needs to see these links anymore. Yeah, so I guess the origin of coffee and open source is actually kind of funny for you folks. You know this, but some of the folks that might pay attention to it. I used to work at Microsoft. I worked at Microsoft for 4 years or so. And one of the things that I did when I worked at Microsoft is I worked in Azure marketing. And one of the things that we were trying to do at the time was like figure out like new types of content. It was during COVID and all that sort of stuff. And I came up with this idea for like kind of like a tech news show. And it didn't really get approved. And I said, well, I think that I should just do it. So I decided to just start interviewing folks, blindly reaching out to folks on Twitter that I followed or I had some sort of respect for or interest in learning more about them. And it just kind of kicked off from there. I think my first guest was Claire Novotny, who works at Microsoft, and all you folks know, and most of the folks probably paying attention know her as well. And I tried to kind of stick to a weekly cadence. I failed a few times in being able to hit that, but I've interviewed tons of people from all sorts of different backgrounds and areas in technology, not just folks in the .NET community. And one of the big things that I've gathered from it is that everybody in tech has a different background, but we all have like some underlying connective tissue that I think we all share, especially the folks that I've talked to. I think we're in general very curious by nature. So we want to learn, we want to enable, we want to better the community. And that's kind of the biggest takeaway that from there. It doesn't matter who I've talked to, like most everybody has like this deep rooted like feeling of wanting to be a part of a larger community, which I think is kind of true for humanity in general. But what does it do for Isaac? So Isaac has had the opportunity to talk to folks that they have no right in talking to. And I think because of that, it's helped me kind of broaden my perspective on how different folks have different experiences in tech. And it's helped me kind of, I guess, rectify some bias that I've had. I think in general, we all have things that we kind of assume or make assumptions about. And one of the things that I've really appreciated about having all these conversations is that not the way that Isaac thinks isn't the way anybody else thinks. And that's probably a good thing, but it's just really nice to know that there's these group of people out there that want to make the developer community better.
I'm really interested in the initial point of view where you mentioned that you had bias, and I'm curious, are you comfortable sharing any of those?
Of course. Just let it be known, like I'm a straight white guy, so take everything that I say with a straight white guy grain of salt, but that's to be expected.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Yeah, go ahead. So you want to know about some of the bias that I've had. So yeah. I think so. I don't know about if folks know a lot about my journey in tech. So I was a back end developer building line of business applications for a long time. And then I got into the consultant space, and tech has always been, I guess, quote unquote, easy for me. Like I've been able to solve problems, and I've always been that person that's like, oh, just give it to Isaac and they'll figure it out. And it wasn't until I had a conversation at Build a handful of years ago with one Scott Addie, and he talked about kind of the developer community at large and how much enjoyment he was getting out of being a part of it. And one of the things that I had an assumption with is that everybody that's in tech either is one of two types of people: folks that want to be a part of the community, and folks that don't want to be part of the community. Like they just want to do their 9 to 5 and ship their stuff and go home. And what I realized is that there are, even inside of those different subgroups, there's millions of different permutations of that, right? And I think one of the things that's really been telling to me is that you have a conversation with somebody who is more in the ops space, but they're a developer. So they do a lot of infrastructure as code, they do DevOps, things like that. Some of the things that they might find challenging or might find quote unquote easy are things that I might find challenging or easy. And I think from my perspective, it's been really impactful understanding how different people learn, because I assume that everybody learns the same way because that's how Isaac learned. And you know, I have a more traditional tech background. Like I went to college and I did all that sort of stuff, and talking to a lot of folks, like the amount of work that people put into learning outside of typical educational platforms is really, really interesting. You know, I think content creation is now a huge thing, not just in tech, but across society. And I think it's because, one, we have a very short window as it pertains to at grabbing our attention. I think that's very, very clear. But two, I think everybody needs to absorb information a bit differently. So I don't know if that answers your question, but like, I guess the biggest thing that I had from a bias perspective is I just assumed tech was easy for everybody, and it's not. And I think that's one of the things that I've tried to kind of instill with folks that I mentor, folks that I talk to out in the developer community that are getting started. It's like there is a handful of opportunities that exist in tech that if you don't take them, they'll turn into obstacles. And I think one of the things that my responsibility is be a very small one is helping folks navigate those sort of things. Did that answer your question?
It did.
No,
Yeah, it did. No, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I always find those things kind of fascinating, and I'm eager to always learn more. And so I guess as an outcome of your initial bias and having learned that, you know, the potential for someone to adopt a technology or learn from something or jump into some unfamiliar area and thrive, I guess, was your big takeaway just that everyone's different? Or
well, I think specifically, and I'll just nail it down, like how you learn is very, very different, right? Like I said, I went to college for information systems, not computer science, information systems. And I had a job lined up before I graduated college, and then I worked in tech, whatever, right? And this conversation that I've had, like tech is their second career. Tech was something that they got into solely for the money initially. There's other folks that they did the whole like BBS or CDs in the mail, like that style of technologist. Folks that went to code camps, folks that learned everything that they know about tech from watching YouTube videos, which I think, you know, if you ask anybody, like, oh, wow, like that's a way that you can get into tech is by learning from free resources, especially when, you know, everybody today, like at some point has had student loans probably. I think, you know, that's the biggest thing. And then obviously there's socioeconomic factors too, like, you know, where people come from in the world, you know, people's identities, people's backgrounds, those sort of things. And I have assumptions or bias based on those things too. And, you know, that's something that Isaac needs to work through, not just from a career or tech or whatever perspective, but from a personal perspective as well. But I think the biggest thing is like, we all just need to learn differently. And I think that it's our responsibility to make sure that everybody feels included in that learning experience.
Awesome. I love that. So kind of taking this a step further and continuing the dialogue, would you say that you see lots of opportunities for growth within the .NET community itself? And what are some areas you could identify that, the community could do together?
Are we ready for spicy takes? Or so first I'll preface this by saying that I love the .NET community. I've been part of the .NET community my professional career, and I would have it none other way. I will say that the .NET community at large, and maybe it's just because I don't have a lot of experience in other tech communities as much as I have in the .NET community, but it feels like the .NET community, to an extent, is very reactionary on the negative side. Like something happens or people immediately want to jump on it and say, hey, this isn't how I do it or whatever, right? Like you see these sort of arguments all the time if you're on social media. And maybe that's just something that exists in society. Like people just want to fight. But I think in general,
maybe that's just social media holistically.
Yeah, that's probably true. But I feel like that's a fair point. But I think even when I have conversations with people like at conferences and stuff, like people are very, and this is, I don't mean this in any negative connotation, but folks in tech, especially folks in .NET, are kind of religious zealots, right? Like they have opinions that you will never be able to convince them their opinion is wrong, or their opinion isn't 100% the right opinion for everybody. So how do we fix that? I think the way that we fix that is by getting more and more people into .NET, the .NET community, that don't have a traditional .NET background. So one example that I hear all the time is like if you're a front-end developer and you've been building React apps, Angular apps, whatever, and all of a sudden you need to build a backend. And you join a company, it's like, oh, we're a .NET shop, we build .NET APIs. So that individual has an opportunity to learn .NET for their work. And maybe that might be the only thing they want to do. But if they enter themselves in the .NET community, they'll make one of two decisions from what I've heard. And it's, okay, cool. Like some of these folks are awesome. They're showing really, really good stuff. And then the other side of that is, oh, this is a very toxic environment. I don't want to be a part of this. Depending on what conversation they come across on Twitter or on, I don't know, Mastodon. Mastodon's pretty cool. Blue Sky's pretty cool too, but mostly Twitter. But it seems to me, and this is just my opinion again, that we do a really poor job in the .NET community of bringing people in. Like we have our gated community, and on this side of the fence, it's great. There's free ice cream for everybody. But in order to get into the community, you have to pay a tax. And that tax is putting up with a lot of junk, in my opinion. So how do we fix that? I think one of the ways that we can fix that, and I think you folks are a part of it, right? Because you're creating content, you're being inclusive, you talk about things that are interesting and approachable for folks. But I think, to be fair, I'm the only person here that doesn't work at Microsoft. So I think that there's a great opportunity for folks in the .NET community who don't work for Microsoft to really empower the .NET community to do really exciting things. And that's why I'm here talking about the community. And I think it's just because I don't want, .NET to continue to go down this path of like, oh, it's enterprise, oh, it's legacy, oh, it's boring. I'd rather build Next.js or whatever the latest hotness is. I want people to learn .NET because I think .NET is pretty cool now. Like, I think there was a point in time when .NET wasn't exciting, but I think now .NET is very exciting.
I agree. And I feel like this conversation of being inclusive, and it's like when you look at your circles and like at work and your communities, like are you surrounding yourself with just the same people that speak like you, that look like you, that like, because I feel like for like women or person of color, like it's so much harder to feel like you belong in those circles. And I personally sometimes still struggle with that. And so it's like, I never had any bad episodes with the community, but I've heard of some that are pretty bad. And so, but like, it's like, how do we create that environment that is comfortable for someone who's beginning to ask questions? I try, for example, on the .NET repos, like people that are beginning, they're gonna ask the same questions because they are in that same part of the journey, but they don't know where to look for answers. But instead of saying, oh, this has been answered before, like that's not how I approach that. Is like I try to help them the same way that I would help the first person. And so like those are some of the things I see in forums, for example.
Yeah, and that reminded me of something really sad that I heard. So for folks that are watching this in the future, a couple weeks ago we had the MVP summit in Redmond at Microsoft campus, and I heard something that was really, really sad by one of the speakers there, and I'll share it with folks just to let it resonate, right? So there are folks that are on social media and they create personas for themselves on social media in the tech industry, and the gender that they are advertising themselves as in the tech community is not their actual gender, right? In this example specifically, was there women in tech who are creating personas for themselves online as men so they don't get harassed, right? And I think that's really depressing for a lot of reasons. But I think one of the things that we have an opportunity to do is be more inclusive, like what you're saying, Maira. But I think also too, like understanding that there are things that people with different genders or different backgrounds specifically can do better than me or somebody else that I guess looks like me, right? Like it is scientifically proven that, for instance, women's brains work differently than men's brains, right? And, I think one thing that's really, really important to call out about that is that's a good thing, because it allows you to solve problems in different ways, which at the end of the day, we're doing all of this stuff in tech because some company wants to make money, right? It's bringing about business value, right? Like there are folks that are able to make money off of open source, and that's great. But at the end of the day, like somebody is paying because somebody is getting money. And I think one thing that's really, really important from that perspective is if we're talking about bringing business value is really earned by solving problems in specific ways. And if one person has the skills to solve a business problem in a very effective way, that person wins, regardless of what they look like, regardless of their background, regardless of how they identify, regardless of anything, right? So that's what it means at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think, in listening to this discussion, one of the things that we need to do a better job of as a community as a whole is, put yourself in that person's shoes that you're talking to, display some empathy. For me personally, I look at a lot of the folks that are trying to break into the tech industry in general, not just the .NET ecosystem. And I think to myself, you know what? At some point in my career, I was that person. I was trying to find my tribe, that place where I felt welcomed, where I could reach out and get help with this problem I was struggling with. I can tell you one of my very first encounters in the .NET ecosystem was with Stack Overflow. I had posted a couple of times on threads asking, what are perceived as simple questions, and I was grilled in those threads by people who responded. That's exactly the type of behavior we don't need to build an inclusive community. I eventually made my way to Twitter and felt welcomed there, and that was, how I got more involved in the community. That was, as I said before, that's where I found my tribe. I felt like, hey, I belong here.
And I think one of the things that's really interesting, and full disclosure, I mentioned this earlier, like you can blame Scott for Isaac in their current situation, because Isaac was very much like, I'm just going to ship code and I'm going to do these things and I'm not going to give back to the community. And then Scott said a few things and Isaac was like, okay, let's try this out. And it was through there that I started contributing to docs. So I started contributing to ASP.NET docs, .NET docs. I worked with Maira a ton in her previous life as one of the folks that kind of ran .NET docs. And I think one of the things that stuck for me was like the value that you not only give, but you get back from contributing. Like, and I say this a lot, like you don't have to write code to contribute to open source or to contribute to technology. You can write docs, you can write test cases, you can create content. None of that stuff is writing code, because we all have different skills that we can use to our advantage to be able to better the community, right? And for me, the easiest was, I can write some docs, especially like if I have somebody who's way better at writing docs, like help guide me through the process, right? And that's one of the things when people ask me like, how do I get started in tech? I want to get into tech, blah, blah, blah. I say, have you figured out what community or what technology interests you and learned about what they're doing in the open source? Some folks just say no. Like some folks say, I want to work at Microsoft, I want to work at Amazon, or I want to work at Apple, and they don't do any other work. I think one of the more interesting approaches is looking at the different technologies that is open source, join those communities, and then over the course of time, you might become a known individual in that community. And that makes life substantially easier, hopefully, for you when you're looking for employment opportunities or looking for opportunities to network or what have you.
And we had like a couple of contributors to the documentation to be highlighted in the dotnet release blog posts. So we have like a community highlighted person. And I saw one of the longtime contributors of docs being highlighted there. And he used to do like, I'm not on the team anymore, so I don't know if he still contributed. I think so, since he still being highlighted. But it's, I felt like the dotnet docs team, like we strive to be that team that guides you on a friendly, respectful way that is like not judging you and is like trying to also give you skills if you don't know how to do it. And so I feel like that's kind of the model that we should strive in all of our channels, right? And we have so many. And I don't know, Isaac, if you want to bring up like since you have the computer open, to have to load the dotnet community page or the dotnet foundation page with some of the resources that people can also find.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to share my screen, I can kind of go through some of the stuff. So, wow, my mouse is looking funny on this. So for folks that might not be aware, so there is an entity called the dotnet Foundation, which is a 501c3. It's a nonprofit organization, and its sole responsibility is to empower the dotnet community to build amazing things on the platform. Right. This isn't something where, maybe if you have other foundations that own the tech stack, this isn't that. So we're very much in the responsibility of making sure the community feels empowered to use the platform. And what does that actually mean? So we have the sponsors that have been able to, I can scroll down, look at our sponsors. So we have sponsors that have donated money to empower the foundation to be able to iterate on goals. And what does that actually mean from a goals perspective? So in the dotnet community, or in the dotnet Foundation specifically, we have this idea of projects. So if you go to the dotnet Foundation.org website and look at projects, these are projects that are sponsored by the foundation. What does sponsoring by the foundation means? It means that the foundation provides legal infrastructure support for these projects to be able to ship their stuff to consumers or ship there to other developers. And I mean, I can guarantee you most of the folks that are paying attention or not paying attention, that's not the right word, are watching us today or watching us in the future, have used one of these packages that are part of the dotnet Foundation. Most notably this one, right? Which is NuGet. At the end of the day, it's all about giving back to the community and making sure that the community continues to be healthy and thriving, right? That's the goal of the foundation. Because without the foundation, these maintainers would have to do things like manage their infrastructure for their build systems by themselves. They would have to do code signing by themselves. They would have to do a lot of other things by themselves. And if folks aren't aware that those things cost money. And if you're an open source maintainer, more than likely you're not making money off of your project. So at the end of the day, it's about making sure the community is healthy and thriving. And we have other stuff too, like we have newsletters and we host meetups and we do all sorts of really, really cool stuff. And I think if folks want to help with the dotnet community at large, look at the dotnet Foundation as an opportunity to do that. We have a handful of different committees that do different things. Like I mentioned, I run the marketing committee, but we have committees on outreach, on projects, on maintainers. education, all these sort of different areas that are vital to the .NET Foundation or to .NET community in general, you can be a part of that, helping that shape the .NET Foundation. So that's my little pitch. We're all volunteers. There's only 3 individuals that are actually paid by the foundation. The executive director, we have a community manager, and then we have some legal folks. But other than that, all the people that you see on the board of directors, all the people that you see in the committees, all the people that are in the committees, they're all volunteers donating their personal time to empowering and making sure the .NET community is healthy, which I highly recommend. If you love .NET, figure out a way to be a part of this. So that's my little pitch for the .NET Foundation.
Isaac, we actually have a question.
Of course.
You mentioned we have legal folks. Could you dive into that a little more? As a member of the .NET Foundation, what sort of legal assistance is provided to these projects?
So I'm not probably the best person to give you an exact answer of what legal stuff folks have access to, but all of that is in our FAQ in different areas of the foundation. But I do know, for instance, if you have particular legal requirements that are needed for your software, maybe particular software licenses or what have you, the .NET Foundation can help you with that. So I highly recommend taking a look at some of the resources on the .NET Foundation site. And if you have questions, you can reach out to me or any of the other folks that are on our board. And, if you have questions and they're unanswered here, we can either get that answer for you or we can make sure that it gets on the website. So, but from my perspective, the biggest things are the infrastructure piece and then the code signing. Those are the 2 big pillars that I think, because they cost money. And if anybody has ever built a NuGet package and had to code sign it, and it's something more than just, I'm going to build it on my machine and publish it to NuGet, if they have some sort of CI/CD system, those things cost money. So being able to not have to pay for those things so I can focus on the value that I bring to the community, that's a great thing.
Yeah, I think, another common question I hear is, hey, I have this open source project. Maybe I will consider onboarding it to the .NET Foundation. Can they help me with things like what license type should I be using for the initiative? Is it MIT? Is it something else?
Yeah, so we provide support for projects, period, right? So if anybody wants to go through the process of project onboarding, you can go to the .NET Foundation site, the projects navigation, and click submit a project. And this will take you to some information where we set a list of eligible criteria and then a place to actually fill out an application. That links you out to GitHub that's where we maintain all of our project onboarding is through GitHub. So .NET-Foundation/projects, that's the GitHub repository for onboarding your project. And you can actually go in here today and take a look at, the projects that are currently being onboarded, projects that have been onboarded in the past, and see if it makes sense. But at the end of the day, it's about making sure that all of your concerns or questions that you have as a project in order to maintain the life of that project is there. One example that just happened just recently, rx.net, which is a fairly well-known NuGet package, fairly well-known project in the .NET open source community. We recently partnered with an individual to transition that project to another entity from a maintainer standpoint, because the existing maintainers no longer wanted to be a part of the experience, or no longer wanted to be part of that particular community, didn't want to maintain that project. So we helped facilitate a transition to another entity to be able to maintain that project. So it's about keeping these projects alive forever, or not forever, but as long as we potentially can, because we understand that we have millions and millions of .NET developers who rely on these projects to bring business value to their companies, right? And if you have some project that hasn't been updated in a long time, there's tons of issues that exist. Nobody is active in that particular community on GitHub, making sure that project is safe and secure. That's a risk for all the people that use that project. And the last thing that we want the .NET community is adding risk to anyone's experience as they're trying to build .NET apps.
So is that something that the foundation keeps an eye on in terms of, is the project still being well run and maintained?
Yeah, so we have a handful of different committees. We have two committees that are specifically around projects. So we have a projects committee, which helps in the onboarding and facilitating of getting those projects under the umbrella of the foundation, and then we have the maintainers committee, whose responsibility is to act as an intermediary or liaison between the maintainers and a positive experience. So that can mean a whole suite of things. So for instance, if people have issues with code signing, or if they have issues with, they need to change their license for whatever reason, or a myriad of different issues. Like, we have these two committees that are here to help folks get the answers to the questions they might have.
And I imagine that folks can join the committees at any point in time of the year versus like the board, which we have like an annual election.
Yeah, and that's a great segue. So the plugin community. So as you can see, we have a community section, and then we actually have when these meetings actually occur. So for instance, the marketing committee, the first Thursday of every month, that's the meeting that I run. So if you love hearing my voice and me talking about stuff, that's the meeting that you want to join. But we have, like I said, we have committees for membership, we have committees for outreach, we have committees for maintainers, education, sponsorship, so on and so forth, right? And if you want to join any of these, they're free to join. You don't need to pass some test. You just need to be interested in helping giving back. Like I said, we're volunteers, so any volunteer work is better than zero volunteer work. So I highly recommend, please, if you're a part of the .NET community and you want to make .NET an amazing place to build things, like, take a look at one of these committees and see if you have any interest in joining them.
For folks that haven't attended one of those meetings, what does a typical meeting look like? What's being discussed?
Yeah, so I can talk about the marketing committee, because that's the one that I'm on the most, because I'm the chair of it, obviously. So we just shipped a new version of the website. So that was something that we were talking about a lot over the last 6 months or so. But now that we're past that, the next thing we're moving on to is what are some of the different things that we can do to drive awareness of the of not just the marketing committee itself, but also the foundation. And one of the things we're currently working on, and we're probably going to be shipping that this month, is we're going to have a .NET Foundation survey. So we're going to be sending out a survey to anybody who wants to take it, collecting information about the .NET developer community and how the foundation can help. And we're going to be publishing that. I think the initial discussion, we're going to have the survey open for 2 months, and then we'll build some cute dashboard, and then we'll make that and all the data from it publicly accessible. So that's something that we're currently working on. So that takes a bit of time, putting together questions and all that sort of stuff. And also, like, it's rhythm of business for the other committees, because the marketing committee is kind of the PR arm of the foundation at large. So if there's other committees that have particular things they need to get out there, whether it be through a newsletter, whether it be through some other campaign, we answer those bells for them as well. So that's kind of like the rhythm of business stuff. I've also been like a part of the sponsorship committee, where we talk about different benefits for sponsors and how we can make sure the sponsor experience is great, because these companies, like, they're giving actual money to the foundation, right? And I think that the worst thing that can happen is, like, where's my money going? So making sure that those questions are answered, making sure that we're providing accurate benefits for the sponsors is a part of that as well. And if you want to, like, find out what the experience is for the other committees, I highly recommend you just join one. Reach out to some of the different committee chairs, say, hey, can I join this meeting? And more than likely, they'll say yes.
If they don't, they come to you.
I mean, I'll always take folks in the marketing committee. Again, like, the only caveat is that you have to listen to me talk, which, I mean, if you've been listening to this for like 40 minutes by now, like, you're probably okay with me talking.
I was actually going to ask if you could shift your meeting times to nighttime to help me sleep.
Yeah.
Radio.
Oh,
I think you're the first person to ever say that my voice is, like, soothing. Usually people are like, wow, your voice is not soothing at all.
So if we so we've covered the .NET Foundation, and you're obviously playing a huge role in that committee's success. But if we kind of pivot here and talk about what are some sources of inspiration for you in the .NET community? What are things going on right now that keep you engaged and want to keep giving back and being involved?
I could have not put together a better segue myself, Scott. I think one of the things that's been really exciting for me in the last month or so, actually, is kind of funny. Another thing that I want to talk about, which is we.are.net. So shameless. I mean, I think at the end of the day, someone got merch, which I think is pretty cool. So for folks who might not know what we.are.net is, this is a community powered solution to kind of aggregating all of the great content and great members of the community. Like, these folks don't work at Microsoft. So the folks who put this together, Tim Canback, as well as Matthias Jost, like, these are folks that are members of the .NET community. They're building awesome stuff. And you can go there and see the different things that are being built in .NET, learn about different content creators, learn about different versions of the community. And this is what inspires me, because this is a group of folks that were like, hey, like, something like this doesn't exist. Like, Microsoft hasn't put it together. The foundation hasn't put it together. Other members of the .NET community haven't. So let's build some social network specifically for .NET. Which, I mean, we were talking about social networks earlier, like maybe we don't need another social network, but I think this is a good social network. So the ability to learn and find and meet new people, especially people that you can learn from as well as engage with in a really healthy way, like, that's what I need in my life. And like, I see stuff like this and I immediately like, okay, the .NET community is awesome. And when we do stuff like this, it just makes me really proud to be a part of it.
So I only recently started hearing about we.are.net like a month or so ago. How long has this been around?
I mean, it hasn't been very long. Maybe Dave knows maybe Dave or Maira might know like when exactly, but I feel like it's been like 2 months. Like, I feel like I saw like the first rumblings on LinkedIn or Twitter, 2 months ago. And I think what happened is a lot of, I guess you could say, like, well-known folks in the .NET community were like, hey, look at this cool thing. And then that kind of like drove awareness really, really high, right? Which is awesome, because it shows that people are paying attention. And especially like if our friends that have lots of Twitter followers like see these things and they want to share them out because they think it's cool and everybody should be a part of it, like, that's awesome. So and as a side note, like, the .NET Foundation is figuring out, we're having conversations with the folks at we.are.net about partnering. So like, maybe we, tack .NET Foundation stuff into their merch or their swag store. Maybe we find ways to kind of integrate the two tools or the two sites, like, not in like a gross way, but like the .NET Foundation trying to amplify we.are.net as much as it can, and obviously we.are.net sending folks to the .NET Foundation if they have questions, right? Because that's what the community is at large. It's collaborating to really bring value to the community. So yeah, I mean, this is cool. I'm excited to see where this goes. Like, I'm already like, I go here like at least once a day looking at stuff, because like, I don't know if you folks have this issue, but if I'm wanting to learn more about content or if I have things that are interesting to me, like, this site has, at least from my perspective, like, aggregated it very, very well. And because they don't work for some large company, like, they're able to just ship new features or ship updates like all the time. So it's pretty cool. And I'm definitely a huge fan of it. And folks who aren't aware of it should definitely check it out.
So Isaac, if I'm a content like creator or .NET developer and I want to get involved in this community, and like, maybe I have a blog that I want people to see, how would I go about doing that?
So I believe what all you have to do is you can sign up, you can log in, and this is going to send you through GitHub Auth, and I'm guessing that it's going to log me in. But you can actually then go through the process of onboarding your persona into we.are.net. And I believe the current way to do it is they have a GitHub repository, and there's probably some steps in here on how to do that. I'm not going to blindly click through links, but you can add your persona using a GitHub PR. And like you can add like, oh, this is a link to my YouTube. This is a link to my Twitch. This is a link to my TikTok. This is a link to my RSS feeds. And it'll ingest all of that and it'll create like a little persona for you, which is pretty cool. And I mean, I'm of the belief that you can never put yourself out in enough places. So like if I can advertise myself here, I'll advertise myself here. But it's also great just like being able to click on like creators and seeing all the different folks that are in the .NET community that are, I guess, going through here and adding their experiences, right? Like there's over 170 something at this point, and that number is only going to continue to grow. And being able to search through particular content is really valuable as well. So again, like I'm using this more than I do like YouTube searches, right? So like if I'm going to learn something, like I recently I was learning more about dev tunnels, which is a cool new feature coming in Visual Studio, or it's not coming in Visual Studio, it's already out in Visual Studio. And I believe Niels has been on the show talking about dev tunnels. I searched for that sort of content in here, not on YouTube. So like it's already becoming like my de facto place to go for all of my .NET content, which is awesome.
Because you kind of know that it's been like,
yes,
it's like a community
exactly.
of trusted like people, and so it's like,
yeah, it's like it's gated isn't the right word, but it's filtered content, right? Because there's a lot of noise if you just do a Google search or a Bing search or YouTube search or whatever, right? There's a lot of noise. And you can watch like the first 15 seconds of every video on the planet and it's a bummer. But here, like, it's trusted content from trusted creators because they have to go through some process, which I think is awesome.
So we've spent a lot of time so far talking about online communities in the .NET ecosystem. Now, let's say I'm a dev that prefers the in-person connections, user groups, code camps, conferences, things like that. Can you speak to what's available for folks like that?
Now I feel like Scott's just reading your tabs on your
Yeah. So I'm sorry to say this, Dave, but this is what a professional interviewer looks like.
hot takes.
I just wanted to call him out.
Yeah. No, I mean, thank you, Scott. You're making this very easy for me. So two things, right? So if we go back to the .NET Foundation site, I mentioned this really quickly earlier, but the .NET Foundation sponsors meetups. So if you're a .NET user group, we sponsor you by providing you with a Meetup Pro account. And what does that actually mean? So you can go to the .NET Foundation site and you can go into the community .NET Meetup section and click Browse .NET Meetups. And this will show you all of the different meetups that we sponsor globally. And these meetups are either having in-person or virtual meetups, potentially monthly. And at the end of the day, like, this is a great place to start if you want to participate in a community as well as potentially speak at a community. And then it goes from there. Like, it goes up to the next step, which you're mentioning, code camps. Like, there's tons of resources out there for different code camps. And then the final thing, which I think is really, really cool, if you have the opportunity to go to a tech conference that specifies in .NET, like, this is a cool site that my friend Brian Hogan, who's also a Microsoft MVP, if you don't know Brian J. Hogan on Twitter. So he put together this site where he's aggregating all of the .NET specific conferences that are occurring across the globe. And, he's providing a lot of information here. Like, if there's a CFP, like if you actually want to present at these, you can go through this process. You can go to the conference URL, you can find out where it is. And he's actually maintaining this. So that's, there's a lot of folks that have tried to do this. It's really, really hard to stay on top of these things. But Brian is going through the process. He's making sure that these sort of conferences are being updated frequently. Folks, that he also has a contribution mechanism, so you can actually contribute code camps. He hasn't gotten any contributions yet. So if you have a .NET code camp and you want to have it advertised on the site, you can do that as well. And he's doing that through a submission process. So, if you have a code camp, please do that. If you're interested in speaking at tech conferences, take a look at some of the stuff here, or being an attendee at tech conferences, because that's where I find my most joy, is going out there and meeting folks, whether they're virtually or in person, and figure out what they're working on. Because at the end of the day, like, I don't I don't write code 8 hours a day, right? So I might not be paying attention to like what the challenges folks are running into today are out in the real world. But if I talk to folks and figure out like, oh, we're having issues with resiliency with cloud patterns, or we love Blazor server and Blazor WebAssembly, but like, wouldn't it be great to have both, right? Like some of these sort of things that are really, really interesting and impacting the developer community, I can go out and talk to folks who are actually building these cool things. And plus, it's just great to talk to people. I think it's pretty clear. Like, I love talking to folks. So, any opportunity to talk to more folks so I can hear my own voice is awesome.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we meet at a conference, Isaac?
Probably. I mean, more than likely, we've definitely met at multiple conferences. But I'm trying to remember if like the first time I ever met you in person was at a conference. I'm pretty sure it was, because I don't think we knew each other when I was living in Wisconsin.
South Florida Code Camp, I remember.
Was that South Florida Code Camp where the speaker lineup was like insane? There was like Cecil was there, Jeremy Lickness was there, Scott Addie was there, David Pine was there.
Yep.
Yeah,
Maira was not there.
No, well, that's because Maira gets joy from other things. She doesn't need to go and shamelessly talk on a stage for an hour to get attention. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know, but that's not something. Yeah, she's the big deal. She doesn't go to these conferences and like talk for an hour or whatever. She keynotes.
Right. She doesn't even mess around with code camps. Just
no.
I recently became a speaker, so it's not it's like I hang around like on that thing. So so I went to my first non-Microsoft conference. But yeah, it was not something that like it was common back in the day for me. So it's just something that like eventually became part of like what I like to do as well. And I feel like some conversations in these stack conferences is like there are some things that like the in-person, like the virtual cannot replace the in-person thing, because like some conversations and some subjects will only arise when you're talking face to face to people, whereas like you start digging deeper, that like the virtual never replaces. So it was good to like finally go to an in-person conference like after the pandemic for me. Like it was the first time last week. So
yeah, it's hard because there's like a balancing act, right? Because like if you're a virtual conference or you have a virtual event, like your impact is way broader, right? Like you can get hundreds of thousands of people watching your content, right? But like you lose a lot of the connective tissue, like you lose hallway track, you lose like those side conversations, you lose some of like that really connective, like people to people interaction. But if you have a conference, like a in-person conference, one, it costs money usually to attend them. And like the users are so small. Like the biggest conference that I've ever been at, like even like the biggest one I've ever been at is like 70,000 people, that's huge. That's enormous, right? But it's not even close to the size of some of these virtual conferences, right? So, for the most part, there has to be some balance. But it's hard, like getting hybrid to work 100%, because it's just doing two conferences at once, which I could just imagine how exhausting that is for folks. But I mean, I think one of the things that I've really appreciated recently, since the conference circuit has opened back up and people are speaking and folks are attending, is the people that are there are the people who very, 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 very much want to be there, because they want to have those conversations. They want to have that next level of learning. They want to network. They want to do these things. And eventually, like, it'll just grow and grow and grow. But right now, the folks that are there, like, they're kind of like cut from the same cloth as me. Like, they need that people-to-people interaction, right? And I think it's exciting to see things come back. But I also understand that we're never going to go back to normal, like, ever. Like, we're always going to be in this weird state. But I welcome anybody who wants to create some experience that makes everybody feel included. And I think that's the most exciting thing about conferences, is that if you want to do it from your house, you can. If you want to go to Oslo, Norway, like I'm going in a couple of weeks, you can do that too. Like, it's just exciting stuff.
So Isaac, you mentioned call for presenter, CFP was the acronym. You also mentioned speaking. How does one build up to something like that, to speaking at, let's say, an international event like in NBC?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll just give my path to it, because I think everybody has done it a bit differently, and some people are better at than me, and they can probably give more clarity into it. So the way I got started is I spoke at meetups. So the first meetup I ever spoke at was the New York City .NET meetup, which is in Manhattan in New York City, because I was living in New York at the time. And I really wanted to like figure out if can I speak in front of people like in like a more traditional way? Like I'd done like customer presentations and things like that, but that's not the same. Like, can I stand and talk for an hour and people like actually paying attention, being interested in me? And the first time I got on stage, I realized really quickly I wasn't nervous. I was excited. I was enjoying the conversations. I really enjoyed the attention. I think that's pretty fair to say about me. But like, I just really enjoyed it. And through that process, like I did I did more meetups. I did a couple of code camps. I think that's where I met Dave. And then I started being like, okay, I can do these in actual conferences. So there's a lot of websites that you can use, like Sessionize is really, really good. There's some Twitter handles you can follow to figure out when CFPs are coming out. And I just started submitting. And, that's always a love-hate relationship, because you fail more than you succeed, at least at my level, when it comes to presenting. But then occasionally you get picked to some really, really exciting ones. You get to do international talks or talks at big events or whatever, right? And I think, that just helps me, because I'm never going to be the person that gets accepted for every single session that I submit. I've already realized that. But what I can do is I continually can make my talks more interesting and more exciting for folks, because at the end of the day, all I care about is the people in the room, right? Like, I'm bummed out when I don't hear back from, or I don't get accepted to a talk wherever, not because I want the attention, but because I feel like I can give something to the folks that would be in that room. And that's the biggest thing for me. So it's about connecting with people, because again, I'm very extroverted, type A personality. So like being in front of people, talking to people, learning from people is kind of my jam. So.
It's funny you mentioned meetups, Isaac, because that's how I got my start.
Yeah.
I see we have someone from Madison, Wisconsin. That's actually where I got my start, at the .NET user group in Madison.
Nice.
I was going as an attendee, and I felt a sense of guilt at one point. I was like, well, I'm getting all sorts of value from these meetups.
Yep.
And now I think it's time for me to attempt to contribute back and share what I know. And what I realized in getting up there and speaking was, I thought I didn't know much that was interesting to that group, but it turns out I actually did. It was the unique perspective I brought to the technology that people appreciated. And I think that's what I would tell folks who are watching. You don't necessarily have to be an expert in something that you're speaking about. It's all about bringing your background, your experience, putting your own spin on that topic that you're presenting. Somebody will get value out of what you're sharing.
Yeah, I say this all the time too to folks. Like, you just have to be one page ahead of the person you're reading to. Like, you don't need to be an expert. You don't need to be like the answer for everything. If you're okay with saying I don't know the answer to that, you can teach to anybody. Because at the end of the day, like, all I need to do is just give you the knowledge I'll already have, and that makes everybody's life better. I don't need to know everything. I just need to know just what I'm teaching you, right? Because at the end of the day, like, if you think that you know everything, like, you should probably go and learn something new, right? And that's, and otherwise, like, it's boring knowing everything. Like, I've never been in that position, but I imagine it's quite boring. So I don't know. Ask Fowler. Maybe he's bored. Maybe he's bored some days. But
the other thing is, you mentioned hot takes early on in the
sure.
So I've discovered that sometimes, everyone embracing their unique perspective, it's okay to say you don't like a certain aspect or highlight that even and say this has been troublesome or this has been difficult. And it's incredible to see like the entire crowd just be, oh my God, someone finally said it. We all thought it, but no one wanted to say it. Now you're up there saying it, and you relate with them that much more.
Yeah, it's about being authentic, right? Like, I mean, I would never put myself in a position where, like, I think the phrase is like a shill. Like, I'll never shamelessly promote something that I don't truly believe in. Like, I talk about this a lot about being genuine with folks, like, especially developers. Like, they need someone to empathize with them, because being a developer in a lot of cases is challenging, because too many tools, there's too many problems that need to be solved. There's lots of pain, like, in trying to get something to work. So if you're not genuine and you're like, oh, this is like, that's why I'm not a huge fan of using the word easy, like, because easy doesn't mean anything, right? Easy is easy for me, but not easy for someone else, right? And if I am broadcasting, or if I'm talking about something is like, oh, this is so easy, or like, this is simple, like, it's not though. Like, it's simple because I've practiced it like 40 times. Like, if I'm the first person coming to it, it's probably not simple or not easy. So, like, if you're genuine with folks and you're like, yeah, this kind of sucks in this one particular thing, or like, this isn't the best, or like, there are alternatives. All you do is you do two things, actually. One, you empathize with the people that have to actually like make the hard choices. And two, you give yourself credibility. Because, you know, if I'm going to go and talk about some particular technology and I'm not a fan of one part of it, I just showed the audience that, like, I am not someone who is just going to like shamelessly promote something because of whatever reason, right? And that's what's the greatest part of the developer community. All of our opinions, right? And our opinions sometimes can be positive or negative for a particular thing. Always healthy, right? Always like constructive. But they don't always have to be positive on particular things, because if technology was perfect, like this job would also be boring, and probably none of us would have jobs, because it would have figured it, like the sentient being would have like figured itself out, and now we'd all just be like at home. But yeah, it's great being a part of this community.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're almost at our time box. Do you think we should shut it down? I could do the outro, or any closing thoughts otherwise? No?
Well, I guess I would pose the question to Isaac before we wrap up. For someone who's listened to us yap for the last hour, and they're thinking to themselves, hey, maybe
why did I listen to this?
Right.
Yeah, they're thinking that, but they're also thinking, you know, maybe I should give this community thing a try. How would you recommend someone dip their toes into that and get involved in some way?
You're not going to like my answer, but it depends. I think what brings you joy. I think that's the first thing, is like, identify what brings you joy. Like, because maybe contributing to open source is what brings you joy. Maybe speaking at events is what brings you joy. Maybe educating others is what brings you joy. Identify what brings you joy initially, and then start to look for resources. Like, the .NET developer community site just came up, right? Like, that is a great resource to use. Like, that's a great place to start. And I think you can find some paths to your journey that way. I think that, at least for me, it's all about how can I give back to this community that I have made a life out of, right? Like, .NET has paid my bills for my entire professional career. Like, .NET, I'm living in a house that .NET has helped me like live in, right? I think it's really important to like remember that these communities are here for us to build great things, but also connect with other people that share similar interests as us. So look for the things that bring you joy, and look for resources that can help you find those things that bring you joy. So I talked way too long. I'm sorry, but that's my thoughts.
You're good.
Maira, and the .NET developer community was my shameless plug to the website.
No, there's no shameless plugs. Yeah. Shout out to the folks who actually run that website, by the way.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for watching on .NET Live. Check out other great .NET Live TV streams and videos at .net/live. Tune in next week, where we're going to have Swami join us to give a deep dive into Azure web apps, talking about .NET 7 and web APIs and things like that. So until next time.